Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on your lithium today. We will hear from Patriot Battery Metals Management, including Blair Way. He's President and CEO of the company. So during today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook, and then we will take some questions. You can type your questions into the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. But before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this webinar, forward-looking statements may be made, and I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the corporate presentation. That can be found on the company's website, patriotbatterymetals.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek out their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Patriot Battery Metals. Now, before Blair steps up, I'd like to say a few words about EV and lithium. Lithium demand continues to be driven by rising EV sales. EV sales are expected to surpass last year's levels despite any supply chain disruptions. There were about 6.5 million EVs and hybrids sold last year, and that will be surpassed this year with already 3.5 million EVs sold in the first half of the year. And lithium demand is really driving lithium prices. According to benchmark mineral intelligence, global average market lithium prices are currently at $59,000 a ton US for lithium carbonate and $64,000 a ton for lithium hydroxide. But prices out of China are even closer to about $70,000 US. Spodumene concentrate prices are roughly $5,000 a ton, just shy of that, for a 6% Li2O concentrate. Now, a tenfold growth in the mineral supply chain is needed by 2030, according to the IEA. And this includes 50 more lithium mines, 60 more nickel mines, and 17 more cobalt mines by 2020, just to meet global net carbon emission goals. Meanwhile, building mines doesn't happen overnight. It takes much longer to explore, develop, and construct a lithium mine than it does to build a car or a battery plant. So further lithium shortages are expected. Now, hopefully, Patriot Battery Metals can be a company that can help step in and fill that supply gap. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Blair Way, President and CEO, to update the audience on the company. So Blair, take it away.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the great introduction. I'll just start right into our presentation. It's also available on our website if you would like to spend some time to digest it in more detail. I will go through it relatively quickly, assuming some familiarity with the majority of what we're doing here. But again, we have a Q&A session later on that I'm happy to answer questions. So Patriot Battery Metals, we're a TSX Venture listed company. PMET is our ticker, PMET. We're also on the OTCQB and FWB, and we're in the process of dual listing on the ASX, which we expect to be in the next couple of months. As David mentioned, the normal legal forward-looking statement, and again, I'll let you read that at your leisure on our website. Some of the investment highlights for Patriot Battery Metals were we own 100% ownership of a 214 square kilometer tenement package in the James Bay region in Northern Quebec. We have at present a number of distinct lithium pegmatite clusters, which have only a couple, and now we're actually onto our third that have been drilled to date. So essentially, we've only really focused on one corridor, which I'll talk about in detail later in the presentation. But we are basically just at the start of a very interesting drill program in respect to this overall 214 square kilometer tenement package. We have a fully funded drill program at 20,000 meters, which we have actually completed now, and by mid-October will be in the order of about 24,000 meters. We've advanced the drill program. It is underway now. So as our presentations are almost always lagging the number of holes, we're now at about 88 drill holes completed to date, and there's about 40 holes pending for assays. We have identified in excess of 70 lithium-bearing pegmatite outcrops over this 20-kilometer trend, but we still have over another 20 to 30 kilometers to assess. We also have been adding additional ground to the west of our property as it has become available. Drilling to date certainly has indicated in excess of 2 kilometers for our principal pegmatite, and I'll discuss that in greater detail. And we've had intercepts of pegmatite from 2 meters to 160 meters with some pretty impressive grades. As a helicopter view, the James Bay region, most people I presume are familiar with the province of Quebec, and we're in northern Quebec adjacent to the Quebec hydropower. So what's fantastic is we have ready access to cheap and green hydropower. It's 15 kilometers away from our site, the Corvette Property, which you can see in the location where it's marked. We're also 15 kilometers away from an all-weather access road, which is a full-use multi-user road, which is maintained by Quebec Hydro. This map also shows some of our peers, James Bay, Rose, Whabouchi, and the Moblin deposit, so we're in good company. This map just outlines the rationale and the justification for how we acquired our ground, and our pegmatite intrusive bodies are hosted in the Greenstone Belt. So we basically staked or acquired as much ground as possible on the Greenstone Belt based on the initial investigation that we did to determine the presence of these lithium-bearing pegmatites. And we now have, as I've mentioned before, over 200 square kilometers, and it's a 50 kilometer trend at present. In fact, we've extended it to the west here a little bit, which has taken it to over 55 kilometers. We have primarily focused on the CV5 pegmatite outcrop area, and to date we have drilled in excess or extended in excess to 2.1 kilometers, but there still is a great deal of property yet to be even explored on the field, let alone drilled. This shows a bit of a zero in on the area that we have been focusing on. There are 6 distinctive clusters of lithium pegmatite. We're just using the CV numbering for them. CV5 and CV1 is the area that we've been focused on primarily and identified the 2.1 kilometer corridor of lithium-bearing pegmatites. But CV4 to the east of CV1 is also of interest because it appears like the CV5 corridor may well continue in that direction, and the drills will determine just how far. CV13 is a recently identified pegmatite cluster. Then we have CV8, CV12, CV9, and CV10 to the west. This area has had reasonably extensive mapping this summer, and we're very confident with some of the clusters that we found, and we intend to put drills in all of these clusters, either through this winter or into next summer, as this fall program is drawing to a conclusion, but around the middle of October. So there still is a great deal more work to be done on these other prospective areas. This is zeroing in on the corridor that we have been drilling, the CV5 pegmatite outcrop, and we've had some fantastic results there with 146.8 meters at 0.93% in our second hole, 58.1 meters at 1.25 meters, exactly opposite the deposit, or opposite the outcrop, sorry. That was hole number 3. We've also had hole number 30, which is 1.22% over 152.8 meters. So we're seeing some pretty impressive numbers at the west end of this corridor. CV1 area, which is the eastern end of the corridor, we've had hole number 17, which was one of our more impressive holes at 40.7 meters with 3.01%. We also had another 159.7 at 1.65, 86.2 at 2.13. So we're seeing some very substantive intercepts with some very decent grades, well in excess of 1 and sometimes 2%. The pictures to the right there just show our CV5 pegmatite outcrop, and then one just below is the CV2 and CV1 outcrop area, which is, as I've mentioned here, this 2 kilometer corridor now has, through drilling, been extended beyond 2.1 kilometers now. This shows a detail of the drilling that we've done to date and some of the holes that are still pending, but as you can imagine, we're continuing to drill, so there are more holes pending at present. But as of August 24th, we had over 16,000 meters over 53 holes. We're well in excess of that now. By the end of this program, we expect to be in the order of about 25,000 meters. This shows some of our summer assay results. These have been fantastic. We do have quite a high number of assays pending. And currently we have had to put some of those assays on hold for publication, simply because we have a financing underway, which I'll mention later. So these are some of our early summer assays, and we again have had some fantastic results with things like hole number 35, 96.9 meters at 1.25%. Then within that, 27 meters at 2.53, and within that, 10 meters at 3.29. So we're seeing some very significant mineralization, spodumene mineralization, with crystals in excess of 1.8 meters now is the largest crystal we've identified within our core. So again, some fantastic results. This is the winter results. This is the winter program that we did drilling on the lake, and we had some great results. Hole number 30 was one of our best holes, 152.8 meters at 1.22%. And within that was 66 meters at 1.51. So what we're seeing is a very good distribution of grade and thickness throughout the corridor. There certainly isn't specific high grade areas. We are seeing some quite higher grades on the eastern end, but we're also seeing it on the western end. So we're pretty confident of the distribution of the grade. These show just the lay of the land as to where our Outcrop CV5, and puts it into perspective in regards to where the first drill holes were. So hole number 1, which was our maiden hole, which we drilled about this time last fall, or actually in early September last fall, and that was 146.8 meters at 0.93%. So we were very happy with that first hole. The second hole, we stepped out to the east just over 100 meters, and that delivered 155 meters at 0.94%. Flipped the rig over to the other side of CV5, and that gave us 58.1 meters, and that was at 1.25%. So we're seeing a pretty significant intercept. True thickness at that sort of level of drilling was somewhere in the order of about 80 to 90 meters. And since we've been drilling out this corridor, we're seeing apparent true thickness is appearing to be in excess of 100 meters as it pinches and swells throughout the length of the corridor. CV6, we also put a hole in there towards the end of the fall, and there we got 63.6 meters at 0.64%. So again, very happy with the results, and that enabled us to continue the drill program into the winter. This just shows the lay of the land from where CV5 and 6 and CV1 were connected. We actually found that CV5 actually continues up the channel of the lake, and CV1 is actually either a separate splay or even an upthrust block from the main CV5 corridor. So we continue to drill at both ends and in the center as we delineate this out, as well as extend it to the east and to the west. These pictures here just show some of the pegmatite core, and what's fantastic about this core is as we pull it out of the ground, we can tell with very reasonable confidence what sort of grades we're pulling out just by the spodumene mineralization. So we don't have to wait 6 or 8 weeks to get assays back to help us make determinations in the field. So the mineralization is very apparent and very easy to understand and interpret, and that allows us to make rapid decisions on site as we determine where the next drill hole should go, and how we can adapt and adjust the drill program to get the greatest result or best result. The 2022 drill program, as I mentioned before, is at intervals from 2 meters up to 160 meters intercepts. So we've been very happy with the results to date. We're certainly demonstrating the connectivity or the corridor length in excess of 2.1 kilometers now, and a vertical depth up to 315 meters. We do have to continue to drill and to fully understand the configuration. It's a pegmatite body, so it does pinch and swell as you'd expect, but it's open to depth, it's open to the east, and it's open to the west. So we'll continue to drill into this fall, and then we'll be we've managed to arrange funding for a winter drill program as well. The surface program was a fantastic outcome. This is really the first time this property's ever had any genuine time on the ground. In other words, we had over 10 weeks with 4 people on the ground mapping and sampling, channel sampling. And we've had a pretty significant discovery at the CV13 outcrop cluster. And we actually have deployed one of the drills from the summer drill program to start drilling holes there. And we've seen some great intercepts, and we'll be providing more information on that as time progresses through the drill program and as we get assays flowing from the lab. The pegmatite outcrops that we're seeing throughout this property are, continue to justify additional drilling to just understand how they're interconnected, but also the potential for them to connect to some of these other clusters, because there's a reasonable amount of glacial till cover. So just the absence of an outcrop does not necessarily mean that there is not pegmatite below the glacial till. And geophysics is not super clear for identifying anything underneath the glacial till. So it really does need to be teased out with the drill rig. And that's really what will be happening this winter and again into next summer's drill program as we explore not only the CV5 corridor, but all the additional pegmatite clusters that we have to work on. This shows the CV13 lithium pegmatite cluster, which we are currently drilling, and we have started to drill around the center, the largest outcrop in CV13, but we will, over the next couple of weeks, continue to drill around these other outcrops to determine what sort of configuration we have underground and see about its potential connectivity even to the east all the way to CV6 and 5, or possibly to the west to CV8 and CV12. It does appear to be a district pegmatite body, so there is potential for that sort of connectivity, but we'll need to use a drill rig to tease it out. The picture on the right shows the CV6 spodumene, the CV13 outcrop of pegmatite, which is just 5 kilometers to the west of CV6. So as we continue to identify more and more pegmatite outcrops, with the potential for there to be some connectivity becomes more and more likely. The preliminary mineralogy on the project has been great. We've been able to determine that spodumene is a dominant lithium-bearing mineral for the work that we've tested to date. So it does appear to be very consistent throughout the deposit. We took samples from the for drill hole number 1, 2, and 4, and 14, and we're seeing a very consistent confirmation of 86 to 99% of lithium deportment coming from the spodumene. There's no significant pentalites or lithium phosphate minerals or apatite present, and the tantalum-bearing minerals are typically columbite or tantalite. So we will continue with the next phase of mineralogy, and that's already commenced, taking material from the winter and summer drill holes to produce some more material for testing. Similar to our preliminary metallurgy, we couldn't be more happy with the results that we've had today. We again tested material for hole number 1 and 2, seen as in excess of 70% recovery just from an HLS process. So what that indicates to us is the dense media separation process is the most likely process that we'll be able to use in order to produce a 6% lithium concentrate, which will result in a relatively straightforward flow sheet and from not a very capex intensive facility in order to produce a spodumene concentrate. So we will continue to expand or expand the testing of other drill hole material as we create or put together larger samples to continue to test confirm the HLS results we've had here. But being able to get recoveries in excess of 70%, and the highest we've received or have recovery has been at 79%. So we're optimistic that we're going to continue to see these same sort of results. So metallurgical results are very positive for this property. So then we go back to the sort of big picture again of where we sit as a project. We've got access to very cheap and green hydropower. The cost for that is in the order of 3.5 to 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour, compared to many of our peers elsewhere in the world, which can be paying upwards of 20-25 cents a kilowatt hour. That's a significant advantage for us. It's also green power. We have access to a road. We can get to the railhead from that road. So yeah, we're very happy with the infrastructure that we have and the location of the property. Sort of finalizing or wrapping up is the shares outstanding are now in the order of 89 million. We have about 32 million warrants, 7 or 8 million options. Fully diluted, we're in the order of 130 million. And our market cap is floating in the order of 600 to 700 million. So we've had a very good year as we've continued to drill and prove up this property. And really, to be quite honest, the property has delivered the results, and we couldn't be happier with the progress we've seen today. So that pretty much wraps up the presentation. Happy to take questions when people are available to provide them.
Okay, thank you very much, Blair. Great presentation. So we are now going to kickstart the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your questions in at any time into the chat box. We already have a few questions here, Blair, so why don't we kick it off here?
Yeah, fire away.
your Corvette project, it's located in a very prolific portion of the province, the James Bay region, but Corvette isn't alone. There are other significant lithium deposits up there, aren't there?
There are a couple around. I mean, there's people exploring, definitely. But certainly what we found is pretty significant with that 55 plus kilometer corridor that we've identified. We probably have enough ground there for 3 or 4 juniors to develop, but we were fortunate enough to consolidate it all together. So we think we have something very significant. There are a few other properties further south of us, which was on my map there with Wabuchi, the Nemaska project. We've got James Bay off to the west. Moblin and Rose deposit, but they're still 200 or 300 or 400 kilometers away. So there's still, we've got Winsome, which is to the west, I think 150 odd kilometers, maybe 200 kilometers away. So there certainly are some other prospects around there, but we feel what we have here is pretty significant. Not to say that Quebec may not host additional scale or additional deposits to the scale that are yet to be discovered for sure.
Yeah, one viewer has been calling this district that you discovered the Saudi Arabia of lithium. So I guess in your discussions with people from Australia and anyone else, have you seen this type of scale anywhere else in the world? And I guess we're talking about hard rock deposits. So.
Certainly for hard rock, we are starting to certainly demonstrate the scale of what we have. I mean, there are some other areas in the world that have quite significant numbers, but there are some jurisdictional challenges with some of those, as well as just execution challenges. So we think we're very uniquely positioned with the scale that we're building, and we still have to continue to drill it to demonstrate and prove up that scale. But with the jurisdictional benefits that we have, the infrastructure benefits with the green, clean hydropower, road access, all those sort of things are really well and truly in our favor.
Right. Right. Okay. And on the map, the project looks like it's a long way north, but this area does have infrastructure. You do have good access.
Absolutely, and the Quebec government is constantly looking at more infrastructure, more roads, and there's talk of a road continuing up past Stoneway Diamonds and beyond, connecting to the road that we would be using, and that would create a quicker route to the railhead if we needed it. The expectation is that it's quite possible Quebec will also host lithium hydroxide plants in the future, of which we will be perfectly situated to. Even if it's in Ontario, we're still very close. The funny thing is we're at a latitude of a very similar latitude. It looks north, and it is north, but it's the same latitude, just north of London in England. So it's always an interesting compare and contrast. The weather is a little bit colder than England, but you take out the Gulf Stream, maybe it'd be a different story.
Mm-hmm. Now, you seem to have control over this entire district, at least the La Grande Greenstone Belt. What led you to search for lithium in this area? How did you acquire the property? And how much of the trend do you actually control?
So we control a significant portion of the trend, but the way it was discovered was from a report, one line. It was one line in the report that mentioned it was in French, and it was Cristal de spodumene vert, which is a green spodumene crystal. And VP Exploration Darren Smith and Neil and another fellow that works with Darren, Neil McKellen, they picked out that line, went on to Google Earth and took a look at what they were talking about, and could see that it's very likely that it was pegmatite outcropping in that greenstone belt, and started staking the ground. And that's really how the company acquired the ground, was through the work that the guys did for us. To acquire the ground, we had option agreements, we had staking, free staking. So there's a number of different ways it was all pieced together, and really that's one of the things that's happened over the last, about 12 months ago. Over the last 12 months, is we've been able to consolidate the ownership of that. It was a bit disjointed when I first came on board, but we've managed to tidy that up pretty good, and we now control, really probably 80-90% of that greenstone belt that has the lithium bearing pegmatites, or that's certainly what we believe. We still have to spend a bit of time off to the east and to the west to understand how that spodumene bearing pegmatite continues, but certainly what we've seen is pretty significant. It's definitely a district. It's not just one little isolated occurrence.
Right. And it's not just lithium either. What other commodities can you find on the property, and are you planning on doing anything to explore for those as well?
We're we're definitely focused on the lithium because that really is what we think. It's pretty spectacular what we've identified. The outcrops are significant. The drill intercepts that we're getting and the grades are cannot be ignored. However, there is a copper trend that we've done some drilling, and in the future it may deserve some attention, but to be honest, it's well down the list. There also is a gold trend that we are pretty confident that there's some historic gold drilling that was done there that had some reasonable results, but we're not even considering that at this stage. We need to be focused on really demonstrating what we have in respect to lithium pegmatites, and that is our primary focus.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you said what you have right now, and you mentioned 70 pegmatite outcrops known to exist on the property. Are all of these lithium-bearing spodumene pegmatite dikes?
They are. Yep. So, and that's only within the 20 to 25 kilometer area of our 55 plus kilometer strike length that we've been working on. So we still, next summer, we'll have a full summer campaign mapping it to the east and to the west. So there's still double the amount of ground that we've covered already. So there is potentially that same number of or more outcrops yet to be identified. Whether they're all spodumene bearing is yet to be determined, but we have had some sort of quick drops in a helicopter, and there certainly appears to be that potential both to the east and to the west.
Yeah, and there might be more dikes under the glacial till. Is there
Absolutely.
a cost-effective way of exploring for drill targets under the glacial till, excavation or something else?
We have looked at a few different possible solutions for that. None of them are that conclusive. One of the problems we have is it's quite wet, and some of the systems that we can use get thrown off by the dampness in the glacial till, but we are able to drill around the outcrops, and then as we drill extending into where we don't see outcrops, and that's what we've done connecting CV5. CV5 wasn't under glacial till, it's under that shallow glacial lake, but we couldn't tell for sure, and we said, well, let's see if they connect. As it turned out, they didn't connect directly, but what we did determine is CV5 continues up the lake and continues up the lake to the east, which we have to tease out this summer this winter with the drill rig. So in a way, the drill is our best tool. Once we identify it and we keep working our way either east or west from an outcrop or north or south, and we're drilling 45, so we can determine what sort of configuration we have under the ground, whether there's parallel splays that we don't see as an outcrop. So the drill is probably the most effective way, but we are considering some experimental options, which we're not sure they'll work, but there's been offers to let us try it for sort of no charge to see if it actually, and we'll do it in an area where we've already drilled so that we know what is under there and then see how effective it is at verifying that.
Yeah. Geophysics are difficult to use, I think. Till cover, but even the contrast between the pegmatites and the country rock might not be that drastic either. So you think
that's correct. The geophysics does give us, MAG does give us some indication, and where we can see, through the geophysics, we can pick out faulting and the like, and that does help us make some interpolation, but it's not conclusive. And once we have the more drill data we have, and then we look at the geophysics again, and when we know what's there, then we can see how that geophysics may be able to help us a little bit more, but it's not a great deal of it's a partial, and exploration is always about gathering little pieces of information and drawing it together to better understand what we're working with, and the drill bit certainly is the most valuable tool we have up there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now you are drilling right now. You're focused on that CV5-1 corridor. What's the extent of that corridor right now, and how likely might it be to extend that further?
So officially it's at 2.1 kilometers. And as you know, we have drilled well in excess of what we've been able to report on our assays, because there's just almost an 6 to 8 week lag combined with other delays such as financings and the like. So we have officially identified it at 2.1 kilometers, but we are stepping out 100-meter step outs to the east. And so far we're seeing, we are optimistic about what we're seeing from the drill holes. Plus, we deployed one of the rigs over to CV13, and we're seeing some pretty decent intercepts there, and in excess of 25 meters. So we are continuing with that one drill rig at CV13 to tease out around those outcrops to glean as to what direction, what sort of strike or dip we're going to get there, so we can start to find out what sort of scale of body, pegmatite body, we can identify there. But certainly both of the areas that we're focused on drilling right now, we're seeing pretty significant spodumene mineralization, and there's no question that it's lithium bearing pegmatites. It's just about understanding the extent of it. But CV5 corridor is definitely extending to the east, and as the lake freezes up, then we will just continue drilling to the east with the drill rig on the ice.
Okay. And you appear to be drilling an average grade of about 1.2%. Still early stage, but maybe how do you compare the potential grade and widths, size of the Corvette compared to, say, other deposits, either nearby or globally?
Certainly, we believe now, we haven't got an official resource, so I have to be a little careful what I say, but with a 2.1 kilometer corridor, even around 100 meters thick and 300 meters deep, you can do the math relatively easy on that, even taking some compromises for the natural pinching and swelling of a pegmatite body. But it appears to be well and truly in the triple digits. And grading, we've seen some pretty crazy grades, well in excess of 3%. We have a drill hole number 66. We pulled out a 1.8 meter crystal, spodumene crystal was in the drill core. And that grade alone of that 1.8 meters is going to be probably 6.5% based on our experience and what we've seen. We have to wait for the assays to come through, but those are significant numbers. So I think based on the grading that we're seeing in some of the higher grade areas or pockets that we're seeing, I think we'll easily be over the 1.2%. And then we have the tantalum offset, which we haven't really talked about, but the tantalum ranging from 100, in some cases 250, 350, as well as in other areas on the property where we have drilled at CV12, we had over 4,000 ppm tantalum. So there is an indication that there will be potential for a tantalum offset, and what that looks like we'll have to work out as we develop the economics of the property. But as we work toward, we expect to be certainly in triple digits, and grading somewhere in the order of 1.1, 1.2%.
Are there portions of this main pegmatite trend that'll have to wait till winter freeze up before you can drill it, or can you drill anything from a barge?
We do have the barge. The lake is shallow in spots, so it has been trouble. It's been irritating that we haven't been able to drag the barge into the shallow sections of the lake. So we will wait till that freezes up, but we've been able to move the barge to most places we need to go to. So between the winter lake drilling, or ice drilling on the ice, and then the barge in the summertime, I think we can have that lake pretty well drilled out, and we need to. And as we tease it out at 100 meter spacings, we will have to come in and infill once we understand the configuration. We have done a bathymetric survey of the lake to just understand the depths, and it's interesting that's probably one of the most useful remote sensing tools we have right now, because the ridge appears to be a potential pegmatite ridge in the lake. So we're going to target that with the drill bit when we're demobilizing the barge now because of the change of the season. So we'll target that ridge this winter with the ice drilling, and it'll be interesting to see if it proves to be true. It may be one of the first times bathymetry has ever been used for targeting drilling. So we're kind of excited to be able to draw that conclusion.
Yeah. Okay. And do you see the lakes on the properties posing any issues when it comes to permitting? Everything is fairly close to surface. This lake is an open pit. What do you expect with the permitting side?
From a permitting point of view, we don't expect any challenges. We've already done some of the preliminary environmental baseline monitoring, inflow, outflow of the lake, fish habitat, all that sort of stuff, and early results, the sort of almost PEA level results, are telling us that there are no issues. Certainly within the Quebec Mining Act, it is our right as a holder of a mineral title to be able to drain a lake in order to access a deposit. If you have to drain a lake to find a place to store your tailings, that is a much bigger issue, and we don't have that issue. We've identified a number of places where we could do dry stack tailing or even wet stack, wet tailings, but it'll most likely be dry stack anyway. So certainly as far as accessing the lake, once we understand the scale or size of the body within the lake and how much of the lake is impacted, but we have already commenced, as I mentioned earlier, PEA level baseline monitoring. And this, as we speak right now, they've come back out again to do more detailed monitoring, and again, fish monitoring to understand what sort of population there's. To date, the indications are the fish population is relatively small because it's a shallow glacial lake, and they're not even sort of consumption type fish, and we'll continue to gain better understanding, but all indicators are that it's a relatively straightforward process. And certainly based on my experience of talking to some of our peers and other mines around Quebec and even in Canada, that there are very few mines that are built in Canada that don't somehow either impact a lake by either having to move it or drain it or some form of, so mines are either on it, beside it, or in a lake. So we don't see any, long-term issues with it. It is part of the permitting process, and it's certainly a very normal process for a mine like this. And it's not a massive gold mine. It is if you look at the scale of a pegmatite mine compared to a gold pit, I mean, we're pulling out much more significant percentage of material so therefore you're making a much smaller hole in the ground in order to access that material. So we're, in a way, we're like a giant quarry as opposed to a gold mine open pit. So we think we can configure that pit relatively modestly to access the deposit and have a limited amount of impact on either the lake or the surrounding lakes as well.
Yeah, your style of mineralization isn't a sulfide mineralization. It's a pegmatite. So okay. Now
and our waste rock. Yeah, again, the waste rock is relatively inert, and that's what we've been able to sort of identify with early geochem to date. And as you said, pegmatite is very inert. In fact, a lot of our tails, depending on the size of the material that we end up with, some of it can be quite effective for construction material because it's inert and has multiple uses.
Right. Okay. Now, several hard rock mines have started production over the last 6 or 7 years or so. And, I think the Aussie MO is to really produce and sell a 4 to 6% lithium oxide spodumene con. It's a lower risk route, letting the Chinese or other converters take the risk cheaper and quicker. Do you plan to create a flow sheet to go all the way to carbonate or hydroxide, or is the creation of the lithium carbonate spodumene your concentrate a goal? Sorry, a lithium concentrate your goal?
Yeah. So we would be targeting spodumene concentrate, and the main reason is mining companies do mining well, and chemical companies do chemicals well, and we've seen a number of errors where that has not worked well in the past for companies trying to be everything to everybody. So the Australian model of producing a lithium spodumene concentrate and selling it to whomever that customer may be, and currently, obviously right now, it is China. But there certainly are indications that North America has a huge demand coming up. There's lithium chemical companies planning to build lithium hydroxide plants in the future. And we see a huge opportunity for us to be the future customers for some of those. So our focus is we're an exploration and intend to become a mining company, and that will be mining, not chemical, not a chemical expertise. We don't see the benefit of trying to reinvent that. There may be opportunities to partner. And I really, to be honest, at this stage, we're not sure what that might look like, but there are chemical companies that are quite interested in a feed the scale of our size. It justifies the construction of a pretty massive, hydroxide or multiple lithium hydroxide plants, and that may well be a good option for us. And one of the things we've learned is that you wouldn't really build a lithium hydroxide plant close to the mine. You're better off to build it close to where they make the batteries. So in that instance, there may be a couple of lithium hydroxide plants in North America that will be looking for a very consistent feed. And if we prove up the scale that we believe we have, that will be perfect, because then those plants can be configured for one feed, and they're not going to have to reconfigure it when another mine comes online or what have you. So that really is our goal. We'll be a spodumene concentrate producer. What our relationships with the value adding downstream stuff, we're not sure what that might look like, but we know there are chemical companies that know how to do that very well. We don't need to try and reinvent that process.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Now, you mentioned you have very large spodumene crystals. Have you started doing met testing to get an idea of iron content, mica content, and maybe tell us why these large crystals are important for some, maybe foreshadowing a density separation as opposed to flotation?
So the benefit of these large grain crystals is that they basically separate very easily from the parent rock. So we don't have to crush and grind them, or we actually don't have to grind them at all. We can crush them down to 6.5 or 8.5 mil, I think is the number. And then that basically through the DMS or HLS test work that we've done to date indicates that we can get upwards to 75, 79% recovery from that process. So there's no real need to grind it in and create all the fines that create a number of problems downstream. Plus the CapEx intensity is much less for a DMS type flow sheet. So really, we don't expect a very complex flow sheet. The test work we've done to date indicates the iron contents are very low, in the 0.4 to 0.6% or something. We're not having any issues. We haven't seen any issues with the micas. We do have some muscovite abound, but it appears to be able to separate out very easily. So the grain size, the crystal size is definitely in our favor. And certainly the met work that we've done to date is indicating that we won't have to do a flotation circuit, and that lends itself to a very simplified process.
Mm-hmm. Now, Rio Tinto reports a method of upgrading spodumene con to 30-40% without building an expensive LCE wet chemistry facility. Have you started to review any of these potential methods at this point?
We are considering them and looking at them, and as you can imagine, we have garnered quite a bit of attention. So there are a number of companies that have reached out to us and are asking us to provide samples to test and see if it might work with some of their proprietary processing, and we'll continue to work with those. We're not so proud that we think we have to do this on our own, and we know people have come up with processes that may well make our life an awful lot easier without having to try and reinvent the wheels. So we're happy to partner with the right sort of organizations that can help us build a better mine. But there are a few of them, so we are going to have to work through a few of those and to determine which one is best suited for our deposit.
Right. Okay, and just a couple more questions to finish off on the exploration side of things. How much remaining budget do you have for this year, and have you started preparing a budget for next year's work?
Absolutely. I mean, we had a 20,000 meter drill program planned, and we have expended that budget. That was about a $12 million budget. So we did extend the drill program because of the success that we've seen, and the desire to put that drill rig, the third drill rig, move it over on the CB13. So we are drawing on some of our hard dollars right now because we've expended our full flow through. But as we've announced just recently, we have a $20 million flow through that is essentially closing October 6th. And the expectation is that will be used for our winter drill program and into the summer. And we've developed a budget where we're looking at a 5-rig drill program for the winter, and we'll have a snow road. We can use snowcats, which will reduce some of our per meter drilling costs because we can minimize the amount of helicopter, because these are helicopter supported drill programs, which are expensive and the most effective way to do the drilling. But as we become more active, we can justify the expense of putting an ice road, and next summer we're planning on an exploration road, which will allow us to bring materials in without having to rely on a helicopter to shuttle fuel and people and the like. So this winter program, we're aiming for commencing mid-January and ramping up to 5 rigs. We have 3 rigs there already. They'll stay at site, and they'll be there ready to deploy as soon as the winter freeze up is complete. And then we'll add a couple more rigs late January, early February. And then come summer, we have a plan for a 5-rig drill program for summer. And one of the main reasons is that you start to get a lot of people, and the more people you have, the accommodations and the challenges that go along with that. So we are exploring solutions in order to possibly accommodate more drill rigs in the summer. And ideally that could be up as 8, maybe even 10 rigs. But at this stage, we're still working through the plan on that. But this program we're just wrapping up in the middle of October will be about 25,000 meters. Those assays will be pending, probably, we'll be getting them released until I'd say probably by the middle of January. The last batch of assays will be through with us, and by then we'll be drilling again. So we'll already be drilling on the lake, extending to the east from CV1. We'll be drilling at CV13, as well as detailed drilling on a trail to better delineate the CV5 corridor. So there's going to be a lot of work this winter and a lot of data flow.
And I guess, do you plan to hit some of those other pegmatite clusters harder with drilling in the new year? And do any of them look as prospective as the CV5 51 trend you're working on now?
The reason we started with CV13 is we see that as being the most prospective. So that's why we're drilling now. We will continue to drill it in the winter, but some of the other outcrops. So if we have 5 rigs, there'll probably be 1 working the lake going to the east of CV5. There'll be 2 working the main sort of deposit to continue to delineate that for resource building. And then the other 2 rigs, one will be at CV13 and the 5th rig will be chasing some of these other pegmatite clusters to the west.
Okay. And right now the deposit seems to be open-ended both east and west. So given that, how deep do you think you want to test at this stage?
It's a good question. I mean, we will have a few deep holes, but we are certainly, as we extend it east and west, it starts to make less sense to go too deep, but certainly 300 or 400 meter depth definition would be great. If it's deeper than that, we'll want to know, but it may not be as critical for a resource because we're extending it east and west. So we have a long cigar-shaped deposit rather than a deeper pit. So it may be something, and again, we're still working through that depth discussion, but it may make more sense to focus on extending it east and west. Plus, we're finding parallel splays, which we haven't touched on that much. But as we get more assays, we will be able to talk more about some of the parallel splays and what we believe, as we drill more of those splays become more significant. As they all of these pinch and swell as you go. So, we certainly expect to see some the winter drill program is going to be pretty multifaceted in what we're able to glean out of the deposit for this winter.
Right. And these pegmatites are fairly consistent. It's not a gold deposit. Do you think you can drill this off at 50 meter spacing, 100 meter spacing? What works for this?
Certainly the spacing is a good discussion, and we are talking with QPs about that to better understand what we'll need. The less complex areas certainly appear maybe a 50 meter spacing is going to be good enough. However, as we find, there are some areas that we've encountered faulting and some fracturing in the material, in the pegmatite intrusive body. So those may need closer spacing, and we have done some 50 meter spacings around CV1 because there is some faulting there that we're gaining more understanding of. But it sounds like 50 meter spacings may be good for a lot of it, and then we'll have to do some infill in between some of those. And we are getting our head around that spacing, but certainly it's in that sort of magnitude.
Okay. I have a comment and a question here. So as long as Patriot has excellent access to capital, there's no need to secure a strategic partner. However, at some point it might make sense to partner up. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the biggest thing, as you can imagine, there are bigger lithium companies that are interested in what we have because of the scale. But for us, we have to demonstrate that scale. So I think there are opportunities down the track, but the mantra that I have, or we have as a company, is that we need to drill, and more drilling, because that will demonstrate the scale. As we demonstrate the scale, that will also demonstrate the valuation of what we have. Our shareholders have pretty high expectations, as do I, as to what we have here. So we just need the time to drill. We're happy to speak with these corporates as to understand their interest and how there may be future relationships. But at this stage, as you mentioned, we're able to fund the work that we need to do quite effectively and continue to drill, to continue to develop the scale. We can head down towards a pre-feasibility study at least, and possibly even to a feasibility study. At that stage, there may be opportunities for partnerships or joint ventures in which it'll be beneficial to our shareholders as well as future partners.
Okay, great, thank you. Any comments regarding your recent site visit? It was well attended, lots of attention. What was a good takeaway for you on that?
The objective with the site visit is, as you can imagine, we had a great deal of interest, and I'm not one to sort of chase around. Oh, there's your lights have gone out, as you said they would. So the goal for the site visit was for people to be able to see the property and understand it in real time. we've spoken a great deal to a number of people, and the interest was there both at a corporate level, banking, funds, and some of our investors wanted to come. So I didn't use it. It was not designed as a promotional tool. It was an opportunity for people. And it was the first time non-Patriot people have really seen the property. So it was fantastic. Anyone that comes out, from my experience to date, anyone that comes out and stands on CV5 and can see the scale of what we have, just looking down to CV1 and even to CV6, let alone getting in a helicopter and seeing CV13 and the potential connectivity there. That was the goal with that site visit. And people now have a much better understanding of what we're working towards. And I think really that was the objective. And I'm not aware of any person that walked away from that site visit feeling the same way that we do as a company, is that the potential is there. We just have to keep doing the work, which is turn in the drills as fast as we can, as effectively as we can, to demonstrate the scale.
Yeah. Any further M&A potential here? Do you want or need to add to your property footprint?
We are looking at a few bits and pieces that may just fill in some gaps that we have. If you look at our map, there are a couple little holes there. We don't really need to fill them in, but if there was an opportunity to do so, we would. There was an acquisition I did a little while ago. The ground became available, and it made sense that we added on. It was part of our greenstone belt, but there's more ground around there that we may acquire in the future. But we have a lot of real estate. We really don't need more, but as we grow as a company and our ability to acquire the ground relatively easily, then it makes sense that we would clip it in. But we still, I think we're at 58 kilometers now of strike length of this pegmatite greenstone belt with the pegmatite bodies in it. So it's pretty significant.
Okay, great. Just a couple more questions, and because we're getting top of the hour. So have you taken any actions to absorb the shares and warrants that go free trading in December coming up?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
Just wondering if you've taken any actions to absorb the shares and warrants that go free trading in December.
We are having discussions, but most of the share, obviously I know the shareholders that hold those shares and the warrants. I mean, the warrants are 75-cent warrants, so we have over, I think it's $25 million worth of 75-cent warrants coming in December and the following in March. So there's a great deal of cash potential within those warrants. The shares that are coming free trading, obviously some of them will probably change hands, but as part of our ASX listing, I believe that will provide an opportunity for liquidity down there for that market as we grow the ASX market and start having a greater volume of shares available down there. But a number of the parties that are invested are not selling anytime soon. They know the potential that we have here, and we haven't even, we have barely scratched the surface here. We're still only at 90 holes in the property, 30 odd thousand meters. It's we still have a long way to go. When we're at 150,000 meters, I think then we're going to really truly understand the scale of what we have here.
Right. Okay. And then you mentioned the ASX listing. Could you give us an update on that? What benefit will that bring to Patriot?
Well, it's certainly, the update on it is progressing. We had some challenges in the earlier, we announced it ages ago, and it took far longer than we expected. It just was a function of some of the complexities of dealing with ASX. We were a CSE listed company and then became back to TSX, and it just created some administrative problems, which you wouldn't have expected, but they were, and we had to deal with them. So those are pretty much behind us now, and we're onto a track. We obviously have a financing going now. We're closing in another week to 10 days time, so we can't do our prospectus until that's done. Then we file a prospectus. We've also got assays pending, so we really should get some of our assays out before that. So we have a lot of moving parts here, but everything going to plan. We should be listed, ASX listed end of November, December sometime. And what that will do for us is that the Australian market really is much more interested in hard rock lithium projects. There's a lot more successful stories, Pilbara Minerals, Mount Holland. There are some stories down there that really have made investors feel very positive about the hard rock lithium space, which is quite contrary to some of the experience we've had here in the Canadian market. We've had a couple stories that have not gone so well for reasons unrelated, really, in my opinion, to the actual deposit as such. It was just strategic decisions that were made. So by being on the ASX, we believe we will have a much greater interest, which will mean higher volume. and we think a higher valuation as a result of people understanding the scale of what we have here.
Okay. And then to wrap up, ESG, it's an important consideration for investors. And I think this is especially true for exploration companies in Canada's north. Could you perhaps tell us some of Patriot's ESG attributes or efforts?
We've had obviously, as part of an exploration program, we have to work with the local communities, and we have been doing so for some time now, well over a year and a half, 2 years, and we have been building those relationships. We actually met with the local tallyman and his family during the site visit. It was not a planned meeting, but it was an excellent meeting, and it was during one of the weather days where the charter flight couldn't come in, so we had a great deal of time to spend some time with them and really go through the project. And we've identified a couple of opportunities where they can actually get into sort of joint venture businesses with us, and we're working through those discussions. So there's some really good opportunities there, and we've been able to talk through some of their potential concerns or issues, and certainly anything we've been able to talk about have been very, very fruitful and productive. So we believe we've got a great relationship there. We'll continue to develop that. So we're engaged with the First Nation community, as well as the Quebec government is very supportive of these types of projects. We're starting to engage more with the Quebec government as we become more significant as a company. And then, from an environmental perspective, we are already commencing baseline monitoring, which in many cases people could argue is too early, but I'm of the opinion, based on my project development experience, you can never have too much baseline information. So we've started that earlier than probably most people would. We now, as I mentioned before, have advanced into PFS level baseline monitoring the month of September, and that will serve us well as we go into next year and can look at continuing that monitoring process. We're looking at setting up weather stations so we can actually start to track what's going on there and better understand that environment. And again, we continue to work through these processes. My background has been involved with putting together EISs for projects just like this, so I'm well aware of the steps that we need to do and working with the various stakeholders. We've done stakeholder mapping and all that sort of thing. So we believe we're well positioned to move this project forward as efficiently as we can.
Perfect. Okay, well, why don't we wrap it up there? Blair, great speaking to you today. Thank you for joining us.
That's great. Fantastic to talk about the project. Always happy to tell people about this amazing project that we've discovered in the James Bay region.
Perfect. Looking forward to the next steps. So thank you everybody else for tuning in. A reminder, Red Cloud will be back next week when Tim Lee hosts Canada Nickel. That's Tuesday, October 4th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you very much.